re-explain that for our audience, who, by the way, we'll be taking questions from everyone in chat if you have them for Ben, so throw those out. Ben, I returned to my question.
Yeah, it was, so there is a GDC talk about it if you want to get the full scoop, but yeah, it used to be a game called Kachina. It wasn't too different in terms of like you played as a hole in the ground, but the theme was very different. It was inspired by like Hopi Kachina dolls that I thought were really interesting, and I was like, oh, cool. This is kind of like an art. This is like an art style that hasn't been explored, and it's got interesting themes built into it. And so that was like the game I started pursuing, and there was kind of this. I forget exactly how long that version of it was in development, but it was going on for a pretty long time, and I was getting nothing but positive feedback on it until I think I showed it at IndieCade or something, and I got a message saying, or like someone did a blog post about how this is like cultural appropriation, and I was like, whoa, what's going on? It hadn't crossed my mind. And no one had said anything prior to that, and so that was when I like went through a process of like being like, is there a way I can make this theme work? Is there a way I can do it that's authentic, or like a way that like honors the people that it's about? And I kind of went as far as I could down that path until I realized that like there is no good way to make a game about this like actually religious subject from a different people. And so I went fully down that path, and then I realized like, oh, the only thing I can do is actually like stop working on this. And so I totally changed like the whole theme, and I changed all the characters, and I changed a bunch of the like the setting, and pretty much I completely overhauled it into Donut County, because Donut County is a way more genuine story about like things I kind of know about. It's about Los Angeles, and it's about like it's got elements of like gentrification, but being kind of like the gentrifier role, and kind of coming to terms with your impact on the community and stuff. And that was my long journey into realizing I was being an idiot, and then I had to make the whole game after that.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't want to dwell on this because there's so much to talk about in this game's long development cycle, but I think we can sort of unpack this a bit more to get to an interesting part of your process, which is what was it that appealed to you about that early aesthetic, and after you decided to give it up and come up with something sort of more your own, sort of like how did you settle on these themes that you ended up sort of like lacing throughout this game? If you did it intentionally, I mean, maybe it was all sort of an unconscious unraveling.
You mean how did like the current themes in the game? How did I arrive at those?
Yeah, like did you think about that consciously, and if so, why were these so important to you?
Yeah, like so I knew early on in the original iteration of the story in the game hasn't changed, because like I knew I wanted the game to be about erasure, because it's a game where you play as a hole in the ground and you erase all the things that are in a place. Because I knew like early on, you play as a hole in the ground, but the hole's not a character. Like the hole is just a concept, right? So like the real character of the game is the stuff you put into it. So the stuff has to be really important. And then literally what's happening in every single level is you're erasing someone's home, essentially, right? I wanted to keep the game pretty human scale, because I think your connection to those objects and the way you expect them to behave, like it just makes a lot more sense to be interacting with like small to like human scale to like building size stuff, and that's why I don't really go beyond that. But yeah, so I knew it was a game about erasure, but I didn't know what the real story was, and so coming back around to like, okay, well, how do I do a story about erasure that I can build off of my personal experience? And so like I know my personal experience is like moving to LA to work on video games and seeing neighborhoods change as a result of a bunch of tech workers moving into a specific area. And so an area like Venice Beach, which was like totally taken over by Facebook and Google, etc., and like boxing, the existing residents out and raising the rent and stuff like that. So I was like kind of aware that I was part of this process and seeing the neighborhood change and stuff. So I was like, oh, cool. I love LA. This is something that's like happening around me, and it's something I'm kind of complicit in. And I can kind of tell this story from the perspective of an idiot, like tech gentrifier person. And that's where like the raccoon BK came from, is just, he's like a cartoon version of my character type, so to speak.
Yeah, he reminds me of like a cartoonishly charming tech worker. In a fun way. And it's sort of like, Brian is based near you in LA, and I'm up here in the Bay Area, where I've lived in San Francisco for a long time, and then I recently moved because it had changed too much and I couldn't afford it. But I was part of the reason I couldn't afford it, if you know what I mean. Like I was one of those people that came in the middle, and so this speaks, I think, to a lot of people in a lot of different places. I wonder, like, could we talk a bit about how you work through the writing, the character creation, the dialogue? Because I think, Brian and I were talking before the stream, and like just dragging a hole around is kind of fun for a couple hours, but this game is really made by the writing and the characters. So I want to sort of talk through your process for that and how you sort of settled on their voices. Are they people or are they just things you've made?
They're, well, originally there wasn't supposed to be any dialogue at all. It was supposed to be a pure, like, every single like story bit in the game would be like its own toy, and you'd like feel out the narrative based on like the acting and the like little mini games and stuff. And I had a version of that in 2016, but it wasn't very good. And it was also extremely expensive to make. And for anyone who's like written a story, or especially done a story in a game, like, that it changes a lot. And once you tie gameplay and levels to a story, it becomes harder and harder to change them, because you can't flip things around once, like, oh, this level is tied to this story beat, but it's also tied to this mechanic that I have to learn at this particular time. Right. So that's one of the reasons why the game is like a little bit shorter, is on the shorter end, because it's so hard to move the pieces around. And so like you can't just like add a bunch of levels in between, or like, it's a jigsaw puzzle. So the characters themselves some of them are based on some people I know. But I try never to do anything like too explicit like that, because I think, one, it's like mean to people. It's mean to like your friends who it's based on. Yeah. It's like most portrayals, especially in this game, are like not that flattering. So
can we just talk about how good this track is real quick? We were talking before the stream. The music.
Quack Anthem.
Yeah, Quack Anthem, which plays during the eternal falling sequence, is so good. So how did you do that? How did that music come together? Who did you work with, and what was that process like?
Well, so I actually made the Quack music. I made all the like raccoon music in it. So like any electronic / stupid track I worked on. So this like.
You mean incredible? You mean / incredible track?
They're always like made with like a sense of humor. So like that one in particular had a long story, because it used to be a ringtone. In the story, it was someone's ringtone that would play before they got a text message, and then like that changed and the character changed, and I took it out, and then I put in that falling sequence with the XP bar, and then I had a different track for a while, but I almost didn't put the Quack song in because it was like too silly, and then I put it in and I was like, oh, never mind, yeah, that's great. Because I like the idea track. I like the idea of the game, like over rewarding you. Like it's trying extremely hard to like make you feel like you deserve this reward of like nonsense experience points. So I like the tension of it being like kind of obviously fake. And then they're doing like a song and dance being like, isn't it cool that you put everything in the hole?
Yeah, you did it. You cleaned up everything.
I mean, it's a very loving parody of sort of the other mobile games it sits alongside to in the App Store, I think. I love this. I want to get to everyone in chat has great questions that I want to get to, but I also want to This puzzle right here is sort of the start of where, like, especially if you didn't play it in any demos, we're sort of like the game, like normal game logic stops working. You have to figure out using other logic to solve the puzzle. So like you're like, okay, my hole is filled with water. What do? I can't swallow anything now, or I can't drop anything down the hole. And then the bird starts. You scroll over the bird and you realize the bird is acting like those fountain birds, those office birds that
Drinky birds.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you think about making mechanics like that out of like other kinds of logic that players may not like grok right away if they're used to like shooters or even like Monument Valley or whatever, even other platformers, puzzlers.
Yeah, I think as an extension of what I was talking about earlier, where like the world of the internal consistency of the world and like the universe of the game, to me is the character of the game, and so that's why I ended up with more adventure game style puzzles than like strictly systemic puzzles. So like there is a version of this game where it's a puzzle game and it's got way more systemic rules, and it's more, you treat it more like a Sokoban or something, where it's like, okay, I have these types of objects and I have to get this over here, and these are my like constraints around it. But I think in terms of getting you to like be immersed in the like logic, the silly logic of Donut County, like the puzzles need to have like their own consistency that you kind of learn over time, like the way the game is silly and the way the game like has really stupid rules. So like I thought that was kind of like the most fun way to explore the puzzles, was to like introduce you to new concepts that told you a little bit about the feel of the world.
Yeah. Alex, can you start? Actually, I'll grab a question from chat.
There's a really good one, actually, if you don't mind me taking one, which is basically exactly a follow-up to that. Warm Pancakes wants to know, how did you get everything to feel so cohesive, the art, the music, the dialogue? And this is a weird question, right? Because so often in the industry, you will see games that are the work of one person or a very small team, and they have such an iconic look and feel and sound, and it's hard to ask and hard to answer, I'm sure, but like how did you find that vision, and once you found it, how did you keep it cohesive throughout development?
That's an interesting like question, because the simplest answer is that I didn't think about it, which is not a great answer, but like I think when you're doing something, when you're working on such a large project, and you have to come up with answers for so many of the problems, if not all the problems, you actually don't have time or energy to think about like novel solutions to every single thing, and so you end up or at least in my case, I ended up falling back on like aesthetics and like feelings and ideas that just come naturally to me, in terms of like, this is the type of art style that I think is really appealing, and it's a good mix of like kind of cute and efficient in terms of like, oh, it's 3D but it's doesn't have lighting on it and stuff like that. And this is like kind of the coloring is an extension of like the illustration work I was doing before I started doing like 3D modeling. And so like a lot of it was intuitive. It's a mix of like intuitive stuff, but also things that I have experience with or I already have a feel for, so that I don't have to think too hard, because there's so many things to think about. So many things to think about.
And like, I want to come back to the writing, because for me at least, I haven't actually finished the game that I'm taking my time, but like the way it's written, the text messages and everything else, it sounds very authentic, and that sounds silly because it just sounds authentic to my experience, which is one experience among many, right? But the people I hang out with, the people I know back home in LA, frankly, they talk like this, and so to me it's very charming. Was there any conscious thought you put into finding that vibe or that tone, or was it all just the way you and your friends talk?
There was definitely, I wanted a certain tone with the dialogue. Like I wanted it to feel authentic to, like you said, like to my personal experience of like what it feels like to text with someone for a really long time, and like what your jokes and shorthands end up being. And like, for instance, like saying LOL at the end of a sentence, or saying LOL at the end of a sentence when you don't mean laugh out loud. So like you can say like, oh, I'm having a terrible day, LOL. And the irony of it is just like part of the texture of a conversation. But like that's the way I text with people. So assumed that if I do that, I'm probably not that unique in it. And so like, I think the specificity is nice because when it does match up with someone's experience, then it feels that much more authentic. So that was kind of the idea behind it.
Brian, do you feel seen? Does this feel authentic to your lived experience?
In different ways. In different ways. I think
you empathize with the raccoon.
No, I empathize with Coyote. I use y'all a lot in conversation. No, actually, I weirdly empathize with Miro, but in other ways. But I want to keep jumping to some questions from chat. Polksal Danny would like to know what your 3D modeling process is like. And Synthophone kind of adds to that question of what was the process of designing and modeling your stuff?
That's a good question. So, the style was, like I said, informed by like the type of illustration stuff I'm familiar with and I like in terms of like the silhouettes and like broad shapes informed like, all the characters and things like that. But it's also efficient because I knew that if I was going to model almost everything in the entire game, like I need a process that scales. And so, the game is, all the stuff is modeled in Maya because that's what I was familiar with. Although people are doing really similar work in Blender and you could do it in anything. And my rule was like no textures. So everything has to be built with flat colors. And so as you can see in the scene, the meshes are cut up just so like in the, if you see the rocks with those like dark red streaks along them, that's actually just cut into the mesh. That's not a texture. And that was my approach to like everything was if I want like that kind of vector quality of like this game would scale to any resolution, I had to build it into every single mesh. And so I had a rule of like no more than 4 colors per object, except unless it's like a really large object. And I did so I built this in Unity, and if you're familiar with Unity, I mean a lot of game engines work with the same type of material system, but the way I did this was I modeled most of them in black and white, like using just like 4 different materials, and I would kind of have like a light one, a dark one, a medium, an accent. And then I'd bring them into the engine, and since they were made with separate materials, which are each their own asset, I would color the scenes in Unity. I'd have the thing open, and then I would just be tweaking the individual colors one by one until I had the right feel for the scene. So that was my process. Unfortunately, each material is a draw call, so it's not that efficient. I could have gone, and like baked them all into textures or vertex colors after the fact, but the shader's so simple, it's just showing a color, so I think it was fine, but it could be optimized further. I just liked the convenience of being able to tune in the actual engine.
Yeah, for sure.
I gotta say, like this sequence had me and my partner like dying laughing.
This is very good. The most charming thing about this game is that there is constantly a sense of undiscovered secrets. I'm sure most of it I'm just making up, but I was like, how can I use these bunnies? Like, if I catch them all as soon as they shoot out, am I going to get a sick... This is really sick thinking, but I was like, can I get a sick achievement if I do this? And I'm playing on the phone, so like, I don't even think there are achievements.
There aren't on the phone, but on Steam and PS4 there are. Yeah, there's a few kind of like counterintuitive things you can do to get achievements, and there is a platinum trophy on PS4 that has a few. Some people are probably just going to look it up, which is fine, but there's a few like secret things you have to kind of read in the Trashopedia to like get a description that helps you figure out a secret somewhere else in the game.
Oh, I was just reading the Trashopedia as just like my reaction to the Trashopedia. Oh my god, this freaking gag.
Very good.
The Trashopedia for me was just like everything Ben has written here is technically true.
Yeah, no, it's very honest.
Like a box is a house, and a tent is just a house that's easy to steal from. Like, that's true.
All true. Just depends on where you're standing.
Yep.
There was some really good questions in chat. Let me get another one, and then I want to talk about, if we can, your early game dev process. I mean, you mentioned you went indie, but I think you worked on indie games before, right? You worked on the Unfinished Swan and some other stuff as well.
Right. It's indie is an extremely broad category.
Yeah.
It's
You went more
it depends
indie.
on where you draw the line.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that real quick. Did you learn anything when you were working on those other games, Unfinished Swan or anything else, that you were able to apply to your work on this game?
And vice versa.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say those games informed a lot of the things I was able to do, and even the structure that I ended up making for the game. So, like, for instance, the Unfinished Swan is a short game that is, very experimental, and it has like these kind of novel mechanics that we tried to use in interesting ways up until the point where we'd feel like we'd explored them, and then it moves on to the next concept. And so I think my process for working on this game was probably informed by the type of work we were doing on that game, because I was coming from a place of like, okay, I want to explore a novel mechanic and I want to tell a story. Mm-hmm. And that puts a lot of constraints on what you can do. And so that's usually the reason why you end up with something that's like pretty short and tight. And also, the Unfinished Swan was a really interesting game that we tried to make really accessible to non-gamers. Mm-hmm. But there was a limit to how much we could do that because it was a first-person control scheme. And so if you're playing it on a controller, like a DualShock controller, and also you can't see anything in the Unfinished Swan in the very beginning. Like, yeah. We expected it to. We were thinking we were making something very, very accessible to gamers who maybe don't even play FPSs, but it still had like a limit to how accessible it really could be, because a lot of people aren't able to like both move and look independently, like on each stick, because that's a lot to ask for.
Yeah, totally.
So the controls to this were kind of a reaction to that, and like, okay, how can I take it a step further and build a game where it doesn't rely on any gaming knowledge in order to get started playing? And so that's why there's only a tap or a click or one button and a movement, and that's it. And you almost never need the tap anyway, except to like advance the dialogue.
Yeah.
And so I built it with that constraint because I wanted to push the accessibility even further. And so like my grandpa can play the game, and he's like 91, and he's like, wow, I was really impressed that I got I got 30 minutes into it or something. And
nice.
His approval isn't always easy to get, so it's that was a big deal.
That's cute. My grandma's 95. I'll see if she is into donut counting next time I go out there.
I guess I should check in with my grandma.
Yeah, let's all check in
gotta
with
get that
grandparents.
demographic.
Yeah.
There's a good question here from StatGstat I want to get to. They ask, Ben went with a publisher for this game, right? What were the key things that made him go with a publisher?
Probably the biggest reason I went with the most important reason to me was that I knew that with my limited amount of time and energy remaining to work on the game, that I wouldn't be able to have make a splash in the way that I think the game needed to succeed. So like I could have put it on Steam only by myself, and then I would hope that it goes viral and people tweet about it and stuff, and people, I had a feeling people would dig it, but I didn't think that kind of that version of the game that was like a bit smaller and that was only on one platform and that wasn't really marketed to any significant extent, I didn't think it would. I think the game had more potential than that. And so working with a publisher was really, really nice for that reason, in terms of like we brought it to a bunch of conventions. They also helped, negotiate deals with console, and, they had a relationship with the App Store. And so like those kind of like soft connections and like them kind of taking care of that stuff for me, like helped really expand, the impact of the game. So I think that was really, really worth it. And also just having someone else to, put some external pressure on the process in terms of like, hey, why don't we launch on this date? Stop noodling on things. That stuff was extremely valuable because otherwise I wouldn't have known when it was okay to stop working on the game. So
yeah,
it helped for a lot of reasons like that.
That is a pretty common reason we hear for indies to tag in with publishers, especially these days. Time management is like a big quandary for a lot of developers. And there's a good question here from Armageddon 104 that I think we're all wondering. How did you make those incredibly complex games with arcane kids while also making this? And specifically, like, I want to know, how did you choose how to allocate your time over the past 4 to 8 years? And how did you manage to keep paying rent while you were working on this?
That's an excellent question. So the key to Arcane Kids is that there's a bunch of us, and all the projects, all the work is split amongst a bunch of people. So that group involves Russell Honor, who is also most of the members are also game developers, usually full time. So there's Russell Honor, Jacob Niffing, Thomas Assel worked on stuff, and Yulia Viktorchik. All super incredibly talented people who are super fun to work with and who are my friends. So the way we made all those games is we met up every single Sunday and we worked on those games. And so I've been meeting up every Sunday for a long time. And
where do you meet up?
That's about it. Oh, we have a co-working space called Glitch City in LA.
Nice. Yep.
So it's really great to have an actual physical space.
So how did you pay rent? It doesn't sound like that pays a lot hanging out every Sunday.
Arcane Kids games lose money. They don't make money.
Yeah.
We do them because we think it's really funny. We've never actually made any money at all off them. That's not how we paid the bills. In terms of working on Donut County, or funding the work of Donut County, I started with an initial loan from Indie Fund, which was super helpful. And I kind of pitched them a budget for hey, this is a really short game, short development cycle. And that was an appropriate amount of money for a game of that scale, but it, ended up growing a lot since then. And so that was part of that funding. And then the other part was I got the opportunity, which I'm really thankful for, to work part-time at Giant Sparrow on Edith Finch. So I was spending, some time every week prototyping for that game, which is my dream job also. So I felt super lucky that I could get paid to make cool prototypes and help figure out the gameplay of that game while I was able to work on this game for 4 days a week or so.
Nice.
But the caveat to all this is that it's not sustainable to work 2 different jobs during the week and then spend every Sunday working on games that make you no money. Mm-hmm. I don't think I could do that past my 20.
Yeah, that's a fair stance to take. What do you think you're going to cut? I mean, you've got Donut County. Are you working on anything else part time right now, or is it just this and Arcane Kids?
It's just that stuff. I don't have. Well, hopefully, I don't need another paying gig to supplement this. But I don't have all the numbers yet for this game.
Yeah, for sure. Brian, you've gotten past where I have, so no spoilers, please. I'll look away.
Oh, he's burning through the game.
Yeah,
oh my gosh!
I just know all the puzzle solutions now. So.
There are tons of great questions in chat, and I will just go and get another one here because they are fantastic. Let's see. Let's do Poke Salad Danny, who I think has a question that I think is kind of interesting. How do you feel about games that have creators' names front and center? She or they are comparing solo devs like yourself and Bennett Foddy to those like Kojima and Tim Schafer. I don't know if you want to make that comparison or talk about your team and who helped you on this, if anybody, but I think it's interesting. I watched your Fantastic Arcade talk from a couple of years ago, I think 2014. And you opened that talk by playing the intro scene, which is your name presents Donut County, and then here it's gone. I mean, instead there's just a made by Ben Esposito flag at the opening sort of launch. Why did you make that decision, and so why is it important for you to have your name on this game?
That's a good question. I think I'm trying to think of how far back I should go. So I should say that Ben Esposito Presents is still in the game, but it you fly right past it.
Oh.
So I'm not like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say we clicked past it earlier in the stream. It does say Ben Esposito.
Yeah, and I should say it doesn't seem to particularly matter either way. So I think it's interesting that you changed it at all, and I'd love to sort of like hear your thought process for how you decide where and how to put your name in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just a question of like feeling things out, and I think it's really cool and interesting for those who like games for them to have some kind of access or a reference point to the people who make the games, because I think it's not common for someone like a designer or an artist to like have their name front and center and be super visible with regards to the game. Usually because there's so many people, it takes so many people to make a game. But in my case, I wanted my name to be on there because this was like supposed to be an undertaking where I would kind of learn everything end to end, and I would understand the whole process. But also it's a game that I think is kind of a mission statement for like what I really like to do and what I want to do more of. And so I felt appropriate, given that I spent so much time on it and I was, the sole person responsible for getting it done. But that said, by the end, I did have a bunch of help that was super, super valuable to me. So my partner, Geneva Hodgson, helped with editing the story and was just really valuable in terms of bouncing ideas off of and helping me come up with kind of story concepts and fleshing out some of the level ideas. Heather Penn helped with some of the art, so she did some concept art for like some later levels, and she also redid the BK and Mira models, which are like, that was like the best thing for the game, because like I had versions of them that were simpler and not like designs weren't as good. So she did an amazing job. And then I had a couple of other friends help. I had Yuli Vigdorchik, who's of our King Kids. He made some tools for me. Every single level has custom collision for every single camera angle. Wow. So every time the camera moves, I had to redo the collision for that. So he actually wrote me a tool that made it a lot easier for me to use splines to just build out the like boundaries of each level.
Can we take a minute before we? And I want you to thank everybody who was involved if you want to, but
Sure.
Can we talk through what that means and why? Like, I'd love to know.
That?
Yeah, like why did you feel the need to redesign the collision model or the collision modeling based on every different camera angle?
Oh, it's just necessary for this game to work, because the camera doesn't move. So if an object rolls off the camera or falls behind a different object, you just lost the game. Like the game just softens. So every scene has to have custom collision. Like you won't be able to see, but like on the barn, I can't let the hole go beyond the barn. And if you move the hole like around the corner of the barn, if an object were to roll over there, you wouldn't be able to see it anymore. You wouldn't be able to get it. And I can't write an automated way of creating that collision without creating all sorts of other problems. So I ended up just manually placing collision for every single camera position.
That begs the question, like, where does everything go in the engine? Like,
falls?
is there just like a space below the playfield and it just like lays down there?
What happens is it falls for like, I don't know, 100 meters or something, and then it stops, and then it gets teleported extremely far away.
That's like Star Trek. That's great. That's just we just teleport all our garbage.
Like somewhere else in the PS4 right now, like all this stuff's manifesting.
It's just there. But yeah, they're all, and the objects are always all on top of each other. So like somewhere in every level is just like a writhing mass of objects, like all on top of each other, spinning around.
Hang on, I gotta buy some energy drinks. This is very important.
Do it. And like
and then I gotta buy the catapult.
I agree. I think it's important for people who have had a significant, like, who feel a work represents themselves to have their name on that work. And even if they've only done a little bit of work, like concept art and stuff, it's important to have your name out there. And and be credited and be thanked. So I sort of cut you off while you were crediting everybody. If there's anyone else you want to mention?
Oh yes, I mean it's really important for me to mention Dan Kestner, who did the majority of the music in the game, and he worked with me from the very beginning. And he's a super, super cool guy. He is not a full-time musician. He's actually like a PhD candidate and in ocean optics, and he's like does all sorts of extremely impressive stuff. And I'm like super. He's a really smart guy. I'm very impressed by what he does. Nice. But also he makes really cool music, and he basically like was super generous and said, hey, you know, whatever tracks I produce, like you can listen to them, and if you want them, we can put them in the game. And so the soundtrack ended up being like 6 years worth of material, or like plus years worth of material from him. And then I filled in the blanks for a lot of the like actual like story related and scoring things.
How
like
do you
directing music and stuff?
I'm just curious, as like as somebody who seems to have a pretty laid back approach to life and is pretty chill and has spent some time working on this project, it seems, without like a firm idea of how it will, or when it will launch, or how it will sell, or how much it'll be priced at. How do you work out like a business arrangement with someone like that? If you've been working together, kind of like listening to tracks for years, is it just like, do you sort it out at the end? Did you have an agreement going in? Like, how did you handle that as an indie?
I've been really fortunate to be able to work with like good friends. Oh, there's a bug there. Don't look at the left tiny piece of wood. No, I don't know what happened with that, but I've been super fortunate to work with really, really good friends. Like I haven't worked with anyone who I didn't know personally really well. And so I think someone who is a more prudent business person would get everything down on paper before working with anyone. But there was kind of an element of trust between, you know, me and Dan and me and everyone else. So like I became more like on top of things closer to the end of development. But when it came to working with Dan, he was just super open and super generous, and we had a verbal agreement that like this is how he'd be compensated for it. And you know, I stuck to all that stuff, and I, you know, tried to be as generous as possible.
Nice.
When finishing the game. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend going into, you know, a relationship with a musician saying like, hey, we'll figure it out. Because
does that just apply to life?
Really bad.
Yeah, I mean, in general, if you're gonna work with your friends, get a contract. But that's super cool that everything worked out for you.
Not good advice to like not have a contract. So I would recommend anyone, you know, pursues that in a serious way.
The classic game dev interview. Don't do what I did.
I mean, most of the lessons I learned were that.
That's kind of the secret bummer of how, you know, we talk about this a lot. I'm like, what did you learn? How did you apply it? But really, so much of what we hear is, I'm never going to do this again, or don't ever do this again if you can't help it. Let's talk about work-life balance, right? Like you sort of alluded to it being very hard.
Alex, can I loop back around?
No, please go for it. Yeah.
Well, so we're joking about, you know, don't do it again, or don't do that. I wouldn't do what I did. I'm just having fun with the barn for some reason. Get in there. You're talking about don't do what I did, but Donut County is still a game that, like you said, like this speaks to you, this speaks to who you are and how you want to make games. How do you reconcile that contradiction between like this game I feel like represents my view of making games, and there are so many things I did making this game that I actually don't think should be done again. They should only be done here, now, in this way, and then never again. Like, how do you like move between those two thoughts in your head as a designer?
It's time. I think the factor is that so much time passes when you make a game that like, or in my case, the 2013 me who like started working on this game full time is a different person than I am now. And so I don't think I'm going to stop, you know, growing and changing. And so like, this was a really good idea for me to make when I was however old I was in 2013. It was exactly what I should have been doing then, and it was exactly what I wanted to do then, and it's different now. And so I can look back. I look back on it and say like, I can't recommend anyone else do this, but I wouldn't have done it any differently. You know, like I had to go through I had to learn that stuff for myself, and the reason I just can't suggest it is because it might not have turned out good. Like there's a chance that things wouldn't have worked out the way they did.
Mhm.
And so it's hard I don't even think I would give myself the advice to keep going, like if me from the past like showed me this game, I'd be like, dude, you don't even know how much time this is going to take for you to finish. Like you think you have it figured out, but you haven't even started.
Mhm.
So I think it's a representation of me in the sense of this is me growing up. This is me over 6 years working on a project and like improving my skills, but also changing my sensibilities and my approach to design. So like you can kind of see the game changes near the end.
Yeah.
Some of that is a reaction to like the work I was doing at the beginning and the way the industry's been changing and stuff like that. So I feel like it's me, but it's not like I wrote it down all on paper and I stick to that and I adhere to that. It's more that this is what I was able to produce, and it represents me at all those different points in my life.
Yeah, I wonder for others who might be in a similar position, other 20-somethings who have a lot of time and energy, what advice would you give for getting through a process like this in as healthy and sane a way as possible? Like what helped you and what kept you going during this long development cycle?
I think the major component that helped was having a community around me that I was part of in person. I co-founded this community space called Glitch City in LA starting in 2013 with a bunch of other indie developers, and it's still going really strong now. And I worked out of that space full time, and I had people around me who were inspiring and who could give me feedback. But the most important thing was just that I had a life, and I had friends who like cared about what I was doing, and I cared about what they were doing. And I was able to like stop working on the game and go hang out with people in like in a totally like different capacity, and like not everything was tied to how well my game was doing and like how valuable that was. Because if I wasn't working next to other people and if I didn't have friends to talk to in person, I don't know if I could have finished this game. It was just so much time.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you said that, because like that's something we don't often hear from indies, although I think it's something a lot of people deal with, is just the isolation of working by yourself for weeks and months and years at a time can be really draining for a lot of people. So that's cool. It sucks that places like Glitch City aren't sort of more readily available around the world. But
it'd be a real benefit for people, I think. But it's possible to start your own. You just need a lot of buy-in from people, and you need to be willing to take the risk and put in the time.
Yeah, there was a talk in LA in GDC. Boy, it might have been like GDC Next in 2014 or so, when the Glitch City folks, and you might have been on the panel, came on and gave a talk about how to start a collective like that, and it was really good. So people should go look that up. If I was good, I would paste the link in, but I'm not.
And if you're ever traveling to LA, I guess we're accidentally hyping Glitch City, but just keep an eye on the Glitch City Facebook page, because they have events to let people come in and check out games and stuff.
Yeah, and we have like weekend work times when you can come and pay a small fee to hang out with people and work on projects and get feedback and stuff, if you want like a taste of the community.
And when you were a teenager, did you ever think anyone would pay money to hang out with you?
I don't look at it that way still.
I had thought about that, yeah.
But I didn't realize like that there was an actual monetary value to like being with like-minded people. Totally didn't realize that until I started working alone, and I was like, oh my god, I would do anything to like be able to talk about making video games with people.
That's a good point. Just a heads up, Alex, quit trying to jump in on me.
No, by all means.
We got 10 minutes left. We'd love to take some more dev-related questions to the making of Donut County. We are speeding through Donut County right here, but I don't think we're not going to finish it in the next 10 minutes. But we're just enjoying ourselves cycling through the Trashpedia. Alex, go ahead and ask your question.
Bryant, how long do you hit the kill screen? How long are we going to go? Are we going to see it? Are we going to see it on the stream? What do you think?
No.
No? That's good.
No. There's so much content in this game. It's all content. Never.
Yeah.
I guess it's worth talking about. When we were talking beforehand, you said that like there's some people who are a little frustrated by how the game. We're rushing through the game. We're at least 60% through by now. So it's a shorter game. There's kind of a lot of people arguing that you shouldn't be making short games in the year of your Lord 2018. How have you been negotiating that process? Especially because that's something that changed from 2012, 2013 to now. Like 2013, everyone was like more games like Gone Home, and now it's like more games like Jurassic World Evolution, I guess.
And now there's like Steam
World
refunds,
Evolution.
right? Like there's opportunities for people to take advantage of short games, and like I'm not saying that happens a lot, but it's something you didn't have to worry about in 2012.
Right. I mean, it's something people are vocal about, even in reviews, where they'll like review it negatively and say, hey, I finished it. It was pretty cool, but too short, and I refunded it. And so it's like, oof, that's like a 1-2 punch.
Yeah. Wow. That's like, hey, I played your game. I used all your content. I used all your work, and here's your money. I want my money back.
I actually enjoyed it, but I do want my money back. That's like, oof, that's the worst one. But yeah, no, I mean, I think not that much has changed in terms of like there are still the people who were saying we want more games like On Home, they still exist, and they played Edith Finch and they loved it, or hopefully they played Donut County and hopefully they were like, oh cool, that was like a really good amount of time and it was a really dense and interesting experience. Those people are still out there, and they have been pretty vocal about saying like they liked the game, which is really awesome. But I think there's people who consume games differently, and video games mean different things to different people. Like they have different utility, they get a different utility out of them.
Yeah.
And so, there's kind of an audience that's probably more on PC gaming and Steam that, sees their like dollar per hour as way more important. And they also see, they like put a very kind of like strict value on those types of games. So like there's people who are complaining a little bit on the Steams or the Steam forums, that Steam reviews or Steam forums, that the game costs $5 on iOS but it costs $13 on Steam, and so like the game is a $5 game, why are you charging double or more on Steam? And my answer, I'm not going to respond to any of the reviews like with this, but my answer is that like if I could charge $13 on iOS, I would have.
Right.
But because, to me, like, I don't see the length and the quality level. I see length and the quality level as like, two sliders that like interact with each other. So like, if I want to make a game that's this dense with like story and content, it has to be short. That's just how it is. And I could have lowered the quality level and kind of like loosened up the story from the gameplay, and added more like filler stuff to it and more like repeatable sections and things like that.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel right for the game, and it didn't match the quality level I wanted. So
yeah, I mean, you certainly, we talked about that earlier, right? You made it sound like you had this outline of a game, this game of holes, and once you put a story on top of that and started putting characters in, it becomes exponentially harder to widen pieces or shorten pieces or make things longer and stuff, because all of a sudden you have a story to worry about and characters to place, in addition to weird, crazy holes to
that's why I wouldn't like recommend someone pursue a game like this by themselves.
Okay,
like,
all right.
the story is cool.
By themselves.
Mm-hmm.
No, you could definitely do this as a team. In fact, it would be way more efficient, and probably you'd be more sane at the end of it. But yeah, I think that trying to tie all those concepts together like seems easier than it is, and then when you get involved with it, you start to realize like, oh, the cost of me making one level is so much more expensive than if it had nothing to do with a story.
Mm-hmm.
Like a single level is extremely expensive because like for instance with Donut County, I ended up with one level that was pretty short, and it had like kind of overlapping mechanics with a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And for pacing reasons it made sense to cut it. And it's like I did all this work, I had this whole thing, but like it made the story drag for no reason in this particular area, and it didn't make sense in terms of the flow of like how the mechanics were coming together. So it made sense to get rid of it. And yeah, it turns it into a jigsaw where like moving a single piece becomes extremely expensive, and like if you cut out a level, then there's a character associated with it, and so you have a character who's now sitting there but doesn't have any lines, and so you have to change the dialogue, and you have to
Yeah, Brian, I see it. Yeah.
So it's like I don't know, it became this like very difficult puzzle to figure out, and so the only way I could really make it happen was to keep it relatively short.
I just had to take a second to give a shout out to 0451, the classic video game password. Shout out to my boy 0451.
It's I love the classic level designer jokes.
That number is going to outlive all of us. We're going to be dead in the grave, and someone's going to be like, it's like Deus Ex, get it?
God damn it, like the freaking Konami code's going to outlive us, and I'm pretty sure I was born after the Konami code was made.
I've forgotten. Is it up, up, down, down, left, right, A, B, start? Is that it?
All right, maybe not.
I Sorry, I'm not good at video games.
It's okay. None of us are good at video games. That's why we do the Gamasutra Twitch channel, where we talk about video games instead of playing them well. This is probably the game I've played best on this channel, strangely, but that's only because I finished it before we started going. So I'm like, I know.
Oh, yeah.
Aside from the secrets, like I know the flow. I know how to unstuck myself.
It is one of my great regrets that we do not have, and this is nobody's fault except mine. Like, we don't have more games like this that are just like playful, enjoy yourself games, not like skill challenge games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like. I don't necessarily want to like try and put those into a category because I feel like that makes it easy to just sort of like ignore them. But games like this are incredible, and people should make more of them. And we're lucky that they are compared to like 10 years ago. But it sounds hard, so I'm glad it. We are sort of coming up on time here, so I'm going to stop talking. Brian, do you have anything you want to add?
No, that's it. I'm just really, I'm honestly like, I'm impressed by the charm. I'm impressed by how much just pressing the X button and these big camera switches will inflict personality, like the choice to sort of just let characters move from pose to pose like a comic book. I'm impressed by some of the stuff that shows up later, and I'm actually really glad we didn't spoil because the end of this game is bonkers. I'm really
it
impressed.
gets pretty off the rails.
It's interesting, Ben. I think it's fair to say that I have a story similar to yours. I moved to LA to work on things that I love, but that meant that like I became one of the people coming to LA and not one of the people who were native to it. So seeing this story and especially the way like we're about to literally do a level in just a moment on the 405. Which it's actually not the. I was actually laughing because it doesn't look like the 405 so much as the 101. But
as long as it's not the 5.
Like I don't know. I love playing games. Like I love playing games that can create that kind of personal resonance. Like I always start at like if it mattered to the creator, it'll wind up mattering to you, and if it matters. And if it really matters to you because you're from the area or you share the experience, then I think that's what gets people to cosplay your game at PAX. Which I did see some photos of Donut County cosplay at this year's PAX. So.
There was some really cute stuff.
Yeah, I love the trash panda.
Was anybody the hole?
Once someone figures that out.
Yeah. Once someone figures that out, that's it. Cosplay is over.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Thank you all for watching. Yeah. Let's do our shout-outs. If you want to follow Ben on Twitter, he's Torah Horse. I assume that's a horse who reads the Torah. It's basically this is the first time I've ever endorsed following someone on Twitter on this stream. Follow Ben on Twitter if you basically want a Trashpedia entry dropped in your stream every couple minutes, every few days. It's like a new Trashpedia entry.
A lot of the writing in this game was like from my Twitter.
Yeah. For us, if you're new to our channel, please follow the Gamasutra Twitch channel so we can keep giving you good interviews with interesting developers. I just saw an email drop in my inbox that the 2 Point Hospital devs are interested in hanging out with us. We're working on talking to the Tomb Raider devs. Like as always, with just games big and small, great and tall. We just want to talk to people who make them, and that's why we're here. So we hope you're here for the same experience. If not, we hope we're at least here for Ben's stellar looks. I don't know, that came out of nowhere. I'm really sorry. Oh no.
Don't be sorry.
Bye everyone.
Telling truth. Bye.
Bye.